Our story begins inside of the sterile white halls of Camino as Anakin Skywalker has arrived here with the 501st clones for a quick rotation, picking up some new members who recently were ready to run out to battle. Typically, Anakin would wait on the vendor in space or just wait on Coruscant, but today he wanted to go with the clones to Camino. He didn't give an explanation, and the troopers were happy to have him along, but something has been nagging at him recently. Around 2 weeks ago, the terrifying incident with Tup and Fives came to a final end when Fives was killed in the lower levels of Coruscant. According to the Chancellor, a virus from Ring Govinda infiltrated the minds of these clones. Perhaps they shared a canteen, and the virus only got to the two of them. It was a rather unsatisfying end to the entire thing, but the Jedi had no choice but to accept it. But in the following weeks, the morale of the 501st was noticeably shallow after everything that happened. Plus, the sudden departure of Ahsoka, the 501st men were just not the same. They would be in time, but right now, morale was low. And in the barracks, Anakin had a hard time shaking the feeling in the force all around him of frustration and sad clone troopers. He took pride in leading his unit from the front, making sure everything was alright with the boys. But the force felt cold, and at night, it became harder and harder for Anakin to sleep. It was never easy in the first place. So, he thought about it so much. He often remembered Obi-Wan's report from Geonosis, and how Dooku revealed that the Republic is under the influence of the Sith. He and the Council didn't necessarily believe Dooku to be telling the truth, but things were looking more and more murky surrounding the war as the days went by. Anakin wasn't into politics per se. He didn't trust anyone involved in them. Well, except for his wife, Padme, and his mentor, Palpatine, of course. But the rest of it was shady and fake to him. So, Anakin would decide there's no harm in digging just a bit deeper into the situation with Fives. But he was keeping this close to the vest. The investigation was supposed to be shut and closed, and ultimately classified. The rumors that a clone trooper killed a Jedi point blank were not exactly great to have spreading around. Anakin would soon find himself in a smaller comms room with a console that he had access to as a general of the Grand Army. Anakin would log in, accessing the file of Fives. It was heavily encrypted for the most part, but there was one new entry log in the whole thing, submitted by CT7567, Rex. It was sealed, but Anakin knew Yoda's passcode, and if anyone would have access, it had to be the Grand Master. So Anakin punched it in, but it beeped red. He was denied. Frustrated, Anakin was nearly giving up when he had an idea. He simply put in his own passcode, and curiously, it worked. Anakin decided not to dwell on it right now. For some reason, he had access, Yoda did not, but whatever, he would think about that later. He turned on this entry to see a troubled hologram of his captain, Rex, giving a grievance report. The hologram of Rex spoke, saying he knows this report will fall on deaf ears, but he thinks there's a possibility that the inhibitor chips that the Kaminoans put inside of them have a purpose that they don't fully understand. He wondered if the chip malfunction causing Tup to kill the Jedi was not a malfunction in its actions, but rather a malfunction in its activation. Rex finished by saying he knows this is likely just paranoia, grief after losing a friend, or maybe a deep-rooted security measure in case the Jedi go rogue. The message ended, and Anakin decided he owes it to Rex, Fives, and everyone else to find out the truth about these chips. So, he tried diving into the files of the clones, locating their DNA files, the number of clones, lifespan information, everything he could possibly learn about them. But finally, the behavioral modification biochip. But, of course, this file was locked down as well. So Anakin left, but he was not regrouping with his men quite yet. Instead, he found himself in the Prime Minister's office, as Lama Su was currently out with Nala Se to check out some newfound data. Anakin would borrow Lama Su's clearance code on his desk. After all, he was researching information on his clone unit. It should be fine. Anakin got back to the console, and he used Lama Su's code to access the inhibitor chips. It was clear that they were indeed meant to keep the clones from being aggressive, but there was something else here. A hidden folder of executive orders. 150 of them. The description of the orders stated that they were for extreme emergency use only. If activated, these orders would be carried out by the clones without question, without hesitation. These were obviously risky. They carried the chance of doing what happened to Tup, essentially just breaking his brain. And so the creator of the chips and these orders made sure there had to be a way to shut them down. Anakin pushed the button to delete the orders. But another error message would pop up. These files could only be deleted from the office from the Supreme Chancellor of the Grand Army, also known as Chancellor Palpatine. And so Anakin logged off, thinking it might be no use. But his ambition and his need to see this through would eventually get the best of him. For the next 2 weeks, he and the 501st Men were thrown back into the war. But every night, even with the distraction of battle, Anakin remembered these executive orders. If there was a chance that activating these orders could corrupt the minds of the clones, then they must be dealt with. But still, Anakin couldn't trust anyone within the Republic, including Palpatine. Not because he thought Palpatine could be evil, but because there might be someone close to him pulling the strings. Anakin remembered once more what Dooku had told Obi-Wan. It was very possible that Darth Sidious was secretly standing atop the Republic, guiding everything. Whoever he was, he could be influencing the Chancellor, the Council, and the Senate. So, Anakin, wondering if he was just being paranoid, still decided to work on this. But he needed help. And upon returning to Coruscant, Anakin knew he would have a few hours before being possibly sent back out to war. So he would go into the Coruscant underworld, back to the warehouse where Fives was killed, where the Force still swirled with emotions and death. And Anakin was sitting down to meditate. He closed his eyes, and for hours, he would focus on Ahsoka. He searched for her, trying to connect to her mind, calling out for her. And in the underworld, Ahsoka was working small jobs as a mechanic, but when she finished for the day and finally could relax her mind, she felt something. And then she heard a familiar voice. It was Anakin, using their bond in the Force to try and find her. Ahsoka had tried cutting herself off from the Force, at least a bit, when she left the Order. It helped to just stop feeling the emotions of war and focus on herself. But even so, Anakin could always find her. Their connection was just that strong. And so, Ahsoka would follow this call in the Force, locating Anakin in the warehouse. It was their first time seeing each other in months, since she left the Order. Anakin would immediately promise that he wasn't going to ask her to come back, at least not yet. He just has one final mission to ask of her. It's for the clones. And that was basically all Ahsoka needed to hear. She asked what it was, and when Anakin said they were going to break into Palpatine's office, Ahsoka laughed, only to find out that Anakin was telling the truth. She just shook her head before saying that they better come up with a good plan. And when nightfall came and the Chancellor left his office for the night, they would get to work. Anakin and Ahsoka soon stood on a narrow maintenance balcony overlooking the Chancellor's tower with the night wind pushing at their cloaks. The Coruscant lights would glitter below them, but up here, everything was quiet. Ahsoka murmured that it feels strange being back with him like this, but Anakin said it's just like old times. After all, it's not like they kept the Council in check with everything they did anyways. It was a small moment of normalcy before the mission. They told each other good luck, and Ahsoka would clip a pair of magnetic claws to the wall, dropping downward. Anakin followed, relying on his own strength and the Force to deaden the impact of the wind whipping all around them. The plan was clear. Ahsoka would disable some exterior sensors and override the maintenance access hatch. Anakin would infiltrate the ventilation system from a lower level, where the heat mapping grid was a bit thinner. Halfway down the tower, Ahsoka would swing onto a narrow ledge and pull out a tiny device, a stolen separatist scrambler that she'd found in her time in the underworld. It was activated as she pressed it to the dome of the building. The security reports would glitch, and for exactly 8 seconds, there would be reports of a perfect loop, indicating all clear. 8 seconds to slip past a system designed by the same Republic that Anakin has sworn his loyalty to. And so Ahsoka was moving fast. She flipped open a Durasteel panel and found a ton of glowing wires. She began rerouting heat coils into a more quiet loopback. It wouldn't shut the system down, but it would blur some readings, enough to hide a single person. And inside of the lower access port, Anakin crawled through the ventilation chute. When Ahsoka's deactivation of the security sensors hit, he surged forward, letting the Force guide his momentum so he didn't make a sound. He reached an intersection with 3 paths. One of them led directly beneath the Chancellor's private office. Shortly, he would reach the office, and the vent opening was tightly sealed above him, but a single controlled burst of Force pressure would twist the screws silently loose. Anakin lifted himself up into the room like a shadow. A red security scanner was moving around the room, trying to detect pressure changes in the air and looking for any movement. Anakin froze. The scanner hummed towards him, but he used tiny, delicate force pulses to shift the air behind him, just enough to confuse the pressure array. The scanner turned away, and Anakin moved quickly to the central computer. He knew Palpatine's security clearance code. It wasn't something he was proud to admit, but he knew Yoda's, Windu's, Obi-Wan's. He wanted to know all of them, just in case something ever happened. Anakin got into the computer, and he first accessed the security feed from the halls. He would curse to himself, as 4 red guards were quickly moving towards the office. Clearly, the scanners picked up something small, and Anakin would dive into the files as quickly as he could. Outside of the office, the 4 red guards moved with a quickened pace. They were on shift in the executive building, and a small change in the ventilation system in Palpatine's office was located. They moved, expecting to find nothing, but they were told to investigate every possible break-in at night during the war. They got to the main doors, and they all activated their electricity spears. The leader of them nodded, opening the door, and they moved inside, ready to attack and arrest any intruder. But like usual, the room was empty. The scanners likely just glitched again. But outside of the office, Anakin leapt high off of the domed roof, escaping just in time, as Ahsoka helped guide him back to the maintenance overlook. She asked Anakin how it went. Anakin just said it was done. He got into the computer, and he deleted all of the executive orders from the inhibitor chips. He still wasn't sure they actually meant anything, but it gave him some peace. Ahsoka would say goodbye to Anakin, and she too felt a feeling of calm, knowing that she may have just saved the clones from their own design. She saw them as people, not really clones in a lab, and she hoped this would make up for her never truly saying goodbye. She knew if she went to say goodbye, the clones could easily bring her back to her old life. So this was enough. And now we will fast forward to the final days of the war. The inhibitor chips were not as advertised. The clone troopers all acted exactly the same way, because they were not truly meant to be used as behavioral modifiers. Their main use was to be turned into loyal Jedi killers at a moment's notice. And as the days flew by, Anakin Skywalker was thrown into the Outer Rim, and ultimately, the missions with Ahsoka were nothing more than a footnote in the war for him. The horrific days in the Outer Rim were blending together. He felt like he was never going to be home. He felt like he was never going to have the life he wanted with Padme. All he wanted was for the war to end and to be with her forever. And so, the war would finally all come down to a final choice. Days later, Anakin found himself inside of the Chancellor's office once more. But this time, everything was different. Jedi Master Mace Windu was about to strike down Palpatine, the only person who was promising Anakin a path to a life with Padme. And as Windu swung down, Anakin cut through his wrist, telling himself, "This is for peace. This is for Padme." Lightning surged through Palpatine's fingers, and Mace Windu was thrown out into the Coruscant night. Everything was happening in a blur, but Palpatine declared that Anakin is now Darth Vader, and he would send Anakin to the Jedi Temple to eliminate every single Jedi. They were all traitors to the galaxy. 1,000 years of planning was coming to a final end in victory for the Sith. But as Anakin departed the office and Palpatine activated his communicator, neither of them would realize the truth of the matter. Order 66 would now be relying on clone loyalty to Palpatine, rather than the Jedi. Palpatine sent out a mass message to the clones across the galaxy, telling them the time has come. Execute Order 66. And so the clones would receive their new orders. But in the end, the clones would receive orders to kill their Jedi generals and friends without any true reasoning, and they would be given a choice. The choice was not given from Palpatine, but rather in their own minds. And instead of killing the Jedi across the galaxy, the clones would call to them and tell them something is wrong. Their executions have been ordered. Every single Jedi is now labeled an enemy of the Republic. There were roughly 5,000 Jedi spread out in the galaxy, fighting alongside clone troopers, and when these orders came in, around 1,000 of them would be shot and killed by their men. It was tragic, but many clones still defaulted to their loyalties to the Republic, even without the chips, even without evidence of any wrongdoing. Ki-Adi-Mundi was killed, but Aayla Secura, Plo Koon, Jaro Tapal, and the Jedi on Kashyyyk were informed of what was happening. On Utapau, Obi-Wan was called back down, as Cody did the same. And on Coruscant, Anakin Skywalker would arrive at the clone trooper barracks, his mind poisoned by the dark side. but he would find the barracks empty. Somehow, the clone troopers of the 501st had already left this area, and they were already marching up the Jedi Temple stairs. Anakin used binoculars, looking up the steps, and as the clones reached the top levels, they began turning around, row by row, charging up their blasters, preparing for anything. Commander Appa moved to the front of the lines, speaking to all of them, saying they'd been ordered by Supreme Chancellor Palpatine to infiltrate the Jedi Temple and execute every single Jedi. Whether it be a master, a guard, even a Padawan or youngling, they've been ordered to kill them without mercy. But Appa told them they have a choice. They can choose to follow these orders, enter the temple, attack the Jedi, or they can side with him, stand up against these cruel orders. And anyone who sides with Palpatine will have to go through him and those loyal to the Republic. Palpatine is not the Republic. He's shown his true colors today, and every one of the 501st clones would choose to stand with their commander. And as Anakin saw the clones take up a defensive stand, he finally remembered everything. He finally allowed his mind to clear. Fives, the inhibitor chips. He was the one who saved the clones from carrying out these orders. The walls of darkness surrounding Anakin's mind would begin to collapse in on themselves. What is he doing? Could he truly sacrifice every single Jedi and break the mind of every single clone trooper? All for Padme? Would she ever truly be with him if he did this? The answer was obvious, and the clarity was beginning to come through for Anakin. Palpatine is Sidious. He is responsible for trillions of beings suffering in this war. Trusting him to help Padme is beyond foolish. Anakin would take off in a speeder, not towards the temple, but towards the executive building. He had to make up for something, and on the cold, wet ground, Anakin found Mace Windu. He was burned, missing a hand, but he had a faint pulse. He'd survived the fall, using the last bit of his Force energy to keep him alive. He'd gone unconscious, and if Anakin arrived any later, Windu would have certainly died. But Anakin would bring him to the temple, telling the clones that Palpatine did this to him. The Chancellor is dangerous and should not be underestimated. Anakin entered, bringing Mace to the medical center, entering the comms room to find the entire council standing in person or as holograms, as Anakin told them the truth. Chancellor Palpatine is Sidious, and he's just executed an order to have all of the Jedi executed, an order that was disabled long ago by him. It would not be long until Palpatine realized what was going on, and when he found that the clones were disobeying these orders, he would personally take a gunship over to the Jedi Temple, flanked by his 12 royal guards, who were loyal to him no matter what. Sidious landed at the bottom of the steps. He demanded that the clones follow his orders. The Jedi have tried to execute him, but the 501st stood strong. And then, the red blade would ignite. Sidious decided he would kill these clones, and together, he and Vader would slaughter the temple. It was a good way to push Anakin into the dark, permanently. In seconds, hundreds of blaster bolts streaked across the steps. The 12 guards were shredded, but Sidious didn't stop walking up the stairs. He deflected every blast, lightning erupting from his fingertips, in powerful sheets of blue. Clones were flung backward in screaming deaths, bodies slammed into pillars, railings, their armor cracking from the inside. Sidious lunged forward, carving through the first line with a wide strike of his red blade. Helmets were splitting open, bodies were falling in searing halves out onto the steps. A heavy trooper was charging with a thermal detonator. Sidious twisted two fingers, freezing the clone mid-run, dragging the explosive into the man's chest before it detonated. The shockwave tore armor apart like paper for dozens of clones. But the 501st didn't break. They climbed over fallen bodies, firing through gaps to slow the Sith Lord's ascent. Sidious relished it. He tore through them with growing fury, hurling clones off the staircase by the dozens. Step by step, corpse by corpse, he carved his path upward. But as he reached the upper levels of the stairs, a huge force push would suddenly strike him from his blind side. Sidious was thrown off of the stairs, flailing far to the hard ground below, softening his landing enough to get up as Anakin Skywalker floated down in front of him, flanked by Shakti and Sindralik. The clash between the Jedi and Sith would be immediate and vicious, and Anakin knew Sidious has already killed 3 masters today. This would not be easy. Anakin, T, and Drellic were meeting Sidious's wild strikes. He unleashed a wave of lightning so bright, it turned the entire plaza below them white. Drellic got in front of the other two, catching most of it, but Sidious would fly right through the lightning in a spin, piercing Drellic in the chest as he fell. Shakti pulled Drellic's blade into her hand, She swung with 2 blades flashing in quick arcs. She cut Sidious across the thigh, but Sidious would kick Anakin away, then lift her from the ground, choking Shakti, flinging her aside. Anakin got up and readied himself once more. Sidious was weakened. Every strike Sidious threw, Anakin was able to redirect. The Jedi were living in him, and Sidious overextended for a single heartbeat. Anakin seized it, dragging him forward with the Force, driving his saber straight through the Sith Lord's chest. Sidious screamed as dark energy poured from his body, ripping upward into the sky before collapsing into silence. When his cloak finally settled against the cracked stone, Darth Sidious lay dead, and Anakin, surrounded by fallen clones who chose loyalty to the Jedi, stood as the man who ended the Sith. When things would begin to settle, the clones who'd survived Sidious's massacre would remove their helmets and step in the front of news holocams. They told the galaxy everything. Every lie, manipulation, it all unraveled in real time, and the Senate chamber would fall into a stunned silence, realizing who the man was that they put into power. Without Palpatine's influence poisoning everything, the Separatist Council could shift into real negotiations. Entire planets that were kept quiet by Dooku and their regretful alliance to him would seek real peace. By the month's end, Republic and Separatists would draft a joint treaty. The Jedi would step away from the Senate to focus on service and recovery and finding the Force again. Anakin would be with Padme, as she of course gave a safe birth, and every single day, Anakin would recall that mission with Ahsoka where he deleted the executive orders. He always wondered, had he not gone through with that mission, would he have ended up in this life he always wanted? The thought scared him, but he was surrounded by Rex, Padme, Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, the clones, and of course the Jedi. Those thoughts didn't matter in the end, and he would help to rebuild a broken order, with Luke and Leia eventually ascending to the top of it. And folks, that is our story for today. It reminds me of a few that I used to do in the past, some of my earliest stories, I think, with just Order 66. And I don't know, I just wanted to kind of go back to a story like this. I think over time, in the coming days, weeks, months, years, however long I keep doing this, who knows, there will be stories that I kind of, not redo, but just remaster in my new. I think I've found better writing ways, better storytelling, better ways to handle the characters, and it's fun to kind of go back to other stories. I've never done this exact title or anything, but just this sort of concept, and just rewrite it in my new, I don't know, experience, I guess. So I had a lot of fun with this one, and I hope you guys enjoyed listening to it. I know it's Order 66, it's a fun topic just to explore, and you gotta, not you, but I kind of have to alter the canon and just the legends of, like, how, there's probably not a delete button, but, like, let's make one for the story, and I enjoyed it, so hope you did as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.